we'll give it another minute or so. I think we have, let's see what the list is looking like. There's Liz. Good morning, Liz. Senator McCrory, good morning. Uh, and let's see, so we have one, two, three, four, five of our subcommittee that I can count, as well as our esteemed co-chairs. So, Mary, should we get started just to respect everyone's time here and get rolling? And as people join us, is that acceptable?
I think that sounds great.
Okay. All right, I'm going to share screen as well. So thank you. Good morning, everyone. Again, just as a reminder, Tom Kosker, co-chair of this subgroup, along with Rep. Mary Waylander. And Mia helped us out and sent an agenda along attached to the meeting invite. So you should have that in front of you or have it somewhere. I will share screen in a minute so we can kind of walk through that. But should we do quick introductions actually, since there's our co-chairs are on here and may not know everyone in the room. So I'll just kind of go again. Tom Kosker. I'm with Disability Rights Connecticut. Mia, you want to just quickly? I think everyone knows you, but just to be safe.
Hi, I'm Mia. I'm the clerk for the Committee on Children, and I'm tasked with kind of just administering the meetings and taking notes and stuff.
Thank you, Mia. You've been doing a great job, John.
I'm John Flanders. I'm the president of Special Education Equity for Kids of Connecticut and attorney who represents families in special ed matters.
Some things I should have started with you, Rep. Wheelander.
Oh, no worries. Good morning, everyone. Mary Wheelander, co-chair with Tom. And yeah, it's good to be here. Good to see you, Mia. I feel like I haven't seen you in 8 years now since session ended.
Good to see you too.
Hamish.
Good morning, everyone. Hamish McPhail, Deputy Director for Content and former kindergarten teacher. I always like to add that to.
Awesome. I don't think I remember that one. Liz.
Good morning. My name is Liz Baumgardner. I'm representing as a parent through CREC. My son attends River Street School. I'm also an administrator and director of an early childhood center here in Wyndham, and former special ed background as well. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Sean.
Good morning, everyone. Sean Sear with Connecticut Association of Private Special Ed Facilities.
Thank you. And Rep. Khan.
Hi, everybody. This is Miriam Khan. I am not normally in this group, just here kind of to check in. I should be here for the entirety of the meetings. If I'm needed, I'm here. Thanks.
Thanks for coming today. And Senator McCrory.
Good morning, young people. This is Senator McCrory, co-chair Education Committee. I'm just checking in, trying to give you some time as I get started on my journey today.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us, both of you. Appreciate it. I know you guys are quite busy with things. So I will, Mary, anything to add before we get rolling?
No, I think I will just preface it that I think my brain is still not firing on all cylinders from sessions. So just gonna give myself a little bit of grace there.
Yeah, fair enough, and I think that's the case with many of us and many in the room, so to speak. So, all right, I said I will share screen. Oh, I almost hit the leave button. That would have been bad. And let's make sure you guys can see my screen now. You can see my agenda. Excellent. Second, just dealing with a technical situation here so I can see everybody. All right, so yeah, so this is sort of I'll say, as Mary just said, everyone's a little bit fried, or many folks are fried. Been a very busy session, and because of the busyness of the session, obviously you all know we didn't meet a couple times during session because things were a bit hectic, and we couldn't really get our stuff together. So we have these items on the agenda really to kind of get us reset. So my first thing is just to kind of reset on this first item that we're focused on. Again, as a reminder, there are 4 tasks that this subgroup is tasked with. I won't go over them all, but we'll focus on the one that's highlighted, this needs-based special education study. That was the first one that we chose to address going back to January when our first meeting was of the subgroup, and then we met in February, and then we kind of got sidetracked in March and April because of session. So just quickly to kind of review this, but if you haven't read it recently, Commission shall conduct a needs-based study to determine if additional special education programs and services are required in the state to meet student demand. In conducting such need-based studies, the Commission shall review approved and non-approved public and private special education schools and the programs and services provided by such schools, including whether such schools maintain a wait list for such services. Department of Ed shall comply with data information requests. Commission shall develop and recommend a new methodology the Department of Ed, in consultation with the Office of Policy Management, shall use when reviewing applications submitted by a private provider of special education services to become an approved private provider of special education services, including application and applicant criteria. So sorry to read on a meeting. I know it's always terrible to read something on a meeting, but assuming many of you probably didn't really engage with this until 2 minutes before the meeting, which is, I know, my typical MO. So just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page. Any comments or thoughts or questions on that? I think that it's tough with all these things. It's fairly scoped, right? We've talked about this in our previous meeting. It's fairly scoped. It can always get bigger sometimes if we're not careful, but I think we're fairly scoped on this particular item. But any comments or questions, Mary or anyone else?
This is Hamish.
Sure.
I had a couple questions on what part of this, I guess the term I'm trying to find is the part of the stream that we're trying to focus on, right? There's upstream, which is before kids get into special education programs and what the services and interventions and structures of those supports are. And then there's what seems like our purview, which is once children are identified as needing special ed services, what is the capacity of the state to provide those services, and the distribution of those programs, the style of those programs, the format of those programs. I just want to make sure that it's not the first part, which is the tier 1, tier 2, and support structures that general ed has. Yeah. And we're more focused on what happens when kids are already in the special education system, because those are 2 different conversations.
Yeah, no, certainly. And Rep. Wheelander and Rep. Khan and Senator McCarthy, anyone can chime in on this as you guys were involved in the writing of this legislation. What I'll say is the way I read it is special education programs, right? So that's students in special education. So a need-based study if additional special education programs. So to my reading of this, it's not addressing the, as you referred to, tier 1, tier 2, those things, tier 3 types of stuff. It's strictly on special education.
So I think what you're saying, Tom, and I believe what we've all been looking at is the difference between programs and services. So more established programs that are somewhat standalone and not just tier 1 reading intervention services.
Right, but this our task is based on the special education. So students identified who have an IEP, who are special education students, the programs and services for those students, not I can't remember what you said, Hamish, upstream, downstream, whatever, but the pre that, right? Some other tier 2, tier 3 type interventions are not part of this. The way I understand it, the way I think we discussed it. And also to that point, it's in the state, right? So it refers to public and private special ed programs, right? Approved and non-approved programs. But again, to the point, and we'll go through it in a minute, the survey that Sean drafted for us. We're looking at talking to public school programs as well, right? Not just the approved and non-approved privates. Does that make sense? And anyone chime in?
Because Tom, I think the last part, I mean, this is really about whether or not we have enough services, right? I mean, it says it right at the end.
Right.
In regards to maintain a wait list for such services, because it's the need. What we're finding, right, is that families are saying that they have to wait over 6 months, if not over a year to 2 years, for certain specialized programming. So
do we have the services available both in
Right.
district and out of district, right?
Right.
You know, where are they? Let's survey. Let's a need-based study. What's the need? What's it look like in districts? What's it look like out of district placements? And oh, Mr. Klimkowitz, I didn't even see you join us. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Klimkowitz even raised his hand so politely. Go ahead, Brian.
Thanks, Tom. I apologize. It's our State Board of Ed meeting today, so I might be in and out this morning.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just wanted to comment on, programming versus, the comment that was just made about parents waiting. So there is no waiting for an IEP to be implemented. There may be waiting for, an environment or a location to implement those services, but the services have to be implemented as designed, by the PPT. And then the LEA is responsible to make sure that that IEP is implemented wherever the continuum of services are offered. So yeah, I'm just wanted to let you know that we have a very robust, it says application criteria there for our private approved public school programs, that actually over the last 2 years, there's been, several adjustments made to. And then there's also legislation that asks the State Department to license private special education programs. So we have a legislative report based on our approval of special education private programs and how that equates to quote unquote licensing and any fees that may be associated with that. And we obviously the non-approved programs we don't approve that in and of itself. And then the public school programs, I'll say in parentheses, because special education is not, it's not a location, it's not a placement, it's a series of services that are individualized. But we know that, the public schools can develop and, individualize programs for students in their own districts. We don't approve those programs, but as our responsibility, we need to ensure IEPs are being implemented. And we're particularly concerned with, as was mentioned earlier, if a recommendation is that this public school system, despite services and supports in the general ed setting or within their district are not able to be implemented, and there's a recommendation to go to a location that can implement the IEP, and there's kind of alternative services that are provided in the interim, that's particularly an area of concern, because in some cases students are in their home when they shouldn't be, and other places kind of in this interim state. So the wait list is particularly challenging in that it's a moving target depending on the day you look at it. And also, and Sean can correct me on this because I know programs operate a little bit differently, but the programs have the autonomy to accept students or not based on their criteria for entry into their programs. So just wanted to make those comments, but looking forward to the work and the collaboration ahead, and any data or information that we can share, we're willing to do that.
Thank you, Brian. And no, I appreciate that. And yeah, it's funny actually as you read it, it's a wait list for such services, which again, as you said, there would never be a wait list for services. There might be a wait list for a placement at a school, which I think is what it was getting at, right?
Yeah, I just
You
didn't
know,
want it to be
yeah,
confused with like the autism waiver as an example that
right,
other
right,
state entities run. There is no
right,
wait list for services for kids with
right,
IEPs.
right. This would be if such schools maintain a wait list, you could have put a period right there, and that would have
Yeah,
been a little
yeah,
bit better,
exactly.
right? And not put for such services. But
Yeah,
I think that's my reading of it, is that we're looking at trying to get at, are these schools maintaining a wait list? Again, is there higher demand than there is supply for seats, basically?
yeah. I
Is the
mean,
way I
we
was
can ask
leaving that.
Sean
Yeah.
now, but I don't know if
Right.
like
Right.
does he have a wait list now where there are schools that are referring students to him that he just can't
Right.
accept those students at
Right.
this time because there's no space.
Yeah, and that's in the survey that he developed. We're going to ask that question to all the providers. So that's a good piece of that. So that's awesome, John.
So I think it needs to be clear that while there may not be a wait list for services, there is a unconscionably large number of students who are not getting services in their local programs because the local programs simply do not have the facilities to do it. They don't have the staff to do it. They don't have whatever. And a significant portion of the desire to move to outside programs is because there isn't something locally. And that's because it's hard to find people to do that locally. It's you're in a small school system where it's not economically feasible to provide the services for one or two students or various things, but there's a huge amount of stuff that's not being provided, and there's mechanisms for dealing with it. There's compensatory education, but in my world, a major reason for parents looking for outside services is simply that there aren't the resources available in their local program. And it would be intriguing for me to sort of chew through the CT SEDS uh, data and see if we can get a handle on that. From our perspective, there's a huge lack of services.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. And I'll say a couple of things as I was reviewing the surveys, and Sean's got his hand up, and we're going to go through those surveys a little bit today again briefly. We're asking those questions, right? So again, the ability to provide and capacity to provide services at the private programs place and also at the school district level, right? To sort of get at some of that. But certainly there's other data we can get on some of that in some ways. So we can get this information through surveys that we're going to do through these conversations, these professionals that are on this group, and through data requests, as Brian suggested, right? There's certain data we can get on that. But no, duly noted, and thank you, John. Sean.
Thank you. I was just curious if there's anything compelling, either programs approved or not, or the public school districts for completing the survey. My biggest fear is that we have a low response rate and we're making decisions based on not enough data.
Great question, and we have to if we're good, we'll move on to that sort of point with these surveys. Yeah.
That's a really good
comments,
point,
yeah,
Sean.
comments, thoughts, yeah. I concern about reply rate. What's the best? And actually, Mary and I talked about this a little bit. What's the best way to administer, right? And who sends it out, right? If it comes from some random, Bergen Commission
Right.
email address, or it comes from, Connecticut General Assembly, or it comes from CSDE or whatever, that will one thing. And Brian, I see your hands raised. That one thing will help. It will increase or decrease, right? The response rate. Brian.
And I apologize because I haven't looked at the survey
That's okay.
in depth, but it is the purpose of the survey to ask the 86 private programs what their current wait lists are.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff, and we can blast through the survey quickly. Sean just sent the link to it. I'm not sure if you were on the email. I hope you were, and if not, someone can forward it to Brian right now.
Probably
That'd be great. Yeah, I know. I'm sure your email boxes. He just forwarded it a short time ago because I wanted to make sure we had everyone top of their inbox. There's two versions of it. There's one that's for private providers, and this is just, he created it on Google Forms, so it's just a simple Google Forms thing, and there's a whole series of questions. So, and then a similar one for public school programming, right? So it's getting at a lot of different pieces of this, but again, some basics about what your program is, and then, and I don't want to just blast through it too quick, but so you got to answer questions. You got to answer questions to go through it, but so it's a lot of stuff. Sean, do you want to highlight what you or kind of summarize maybe what you put in there since you created
Sure.
it?
I think if we look at it from the 30,000-foot view, we're asking private providers, why are districts referring to you? And do you have the capacity to meet districts' needs? On the other side, we're asking the public school districts, what are the reasons that lead you to referring out to a private provider? That's like the 30,000-foot view, so that we can connect the dots, so we could see, where the barriers are for public schools to provide that programming more locally. And then we're looking to see, I think with the connection to whether or not the application process for additional privates, do we need them or not? So I think that there's a connection that's going to be made, and there's a lot of questions here, but we'll be able to see, are the current services adequate in the private side, and what are the barriers to keeping kids in the public school district?
Go ahead, Brian.
Thanks, Sean. That's really helpful. I would just like a couple of things. We know the district outplacement rates by district, so that's not the question that we're asking in the survey. I think getting around why could be a series of individual circumstances and stories, but there may be themes, for our larger districts especially. I'm just thinking about, the medium-sized district, typical district that has, between 10 to 20 outplacements, and each of those outplacements are for a different reason. It is, or it may be where they're seeing a theme of younger students exhibiting behaviors that, are challenging in the environment, right? The having the question related to the private school providers, I think is important. And then, also our regional education programs, that run special education programs as well, is we could talk to the directors of the RESC programs who run the RESC special ed placements and gather quite a bit of data, because they're overseeing all of those referrals through the year. And we have the new legislative requirement that an FBA and a behavior intervention plan must be done unless safety reasons preclude prior to a placement. And so we have some data that we can share about that, and then the experience, like Sean, on your end and the RESC's end, are students coming with documented FBAs and behavior plans. If they're placed for behavior reasons, students are placed for all reasons. And then the other thing that I would hope we could understand, John, to your point, is parents requesting, placement as well is another piece of this. It's not always the school district. Sometimes it's the school district defending the current placement and the parent pushing for placement because they feel like their students' needs aren't being met.
The
But
surveys do
Do
indicate,
address those, yeah.
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah,
It's
thanks, Brian. That's good stuff. And this
I was
is
just trying
important
to
because we want to
find
make sure.
things that we maybe
Yeah.
have information for if
Yeah.
the survey results are low that we can supplement.
Yeah.
I think it might be the survey is very thorough, and thank you again, Sean, for creating those. That was a big lift right at the beginning. And I think it would be helpful and probably a smart idea if when we get the final distribution list for both surveys, if we can set some sort of a parameter of a percentage back that we need to meet in order to take that information, actually collate it. Because you're right, John. That was a really great observation that we don't want to be trying to create new policy or even, contemplate it if we get 2% back. Um, so that's
Yeah,
a something to think
and
about.
again, that's a great point that you're all making, because it's so the survey is one method of gathering data. CSDE data is another method of gathering data. Conversations, I'll call them interviews. I mean, depending on how much energy and time we have to do this work. Again, this is all kind of all of our side work, volunteer work, sort of stuff being on this commission. But to the extent we can have conversations or interviews with different folks in these different roles, right, is another way to gather information. So again, these are all for us or this group collectively to talk about. You know what I mean? How to again supplement if the survey response is low and stuff like that. So,
Do we expect the directors, both for the private schools and the LEAs, to complete these surveys themselves? Or
yeah, we
perhaps,
did. Yeah, we
yeah.
didn't say who the person is that they're sending it to. That's a good question.
But I'm just saying, like, could they delegate it to a staff member, or pretty much would be the director? Maybe if they have an out of district, if it's a larger district. I'm just thinking about everything on directors' plates in May.
Right.
In June. I'm not sure, we
Yeah.
haven't talked about the timeline, but
I think it's going to have
the
to be
response rates will likely be low if we send it like to, they're working on their IDA grants.
Right.
There's a lot that they're
Right.
wrapping up in the
May, June
school
is
year.
terrible. Right. May,
This
June's
is their
terrible. Right.
PPT season.
Right. We could also get it to them in, late June and July and when
Yeah.
things calm down a bit too, right? So we
Right,
could
and a
do
lot
that.
of directors do work through the summer.
Yeah, most of them, I think, right? Yeah, most of those are 12-month positions. We got
Yeah.
a lot of hands up, a lot of conversation. Hamish, we'll go in order.
Mine was just more of a process question because I recognize that we are not the only subgroup doing work in the Bergen Commission. And I don't know, I don't have purview into other ones, so I'm thankful that the chairs are here because it's if we're going to, are any of the other subgroups planning on sending out surveys or sending out communications to districts regarding issues related to this? Because the worst thing I don't think it would be helpful to do like a trickle of like each email here, email there, lack of consistency regarding language, lack of consistency regarding, formatting or distribution lists. So if there is any consistency or if there is any communication, like figuring out a way to streamline it so that we can get the best response would be helpful. I don't know if there are any surveys.
Yeah,
We
good
are
question, Hamish.
tasked, yeah, we're tasked with this specifically. Other subcommittees don't have the same assignments or subjects focus, so I don't think we'll have that kind of overlap, but it's good to be aware of.
But we can also, yeah, to that point, and Miriam or Senator McCrory can chime in if you're aware of it. We can look through all the other tasks, right? All the other Bergen Commission tasks that got assigned this year to the other subgroups and see if there's some overlap, number one, and talk to the chairs, right? I mean, I know I sit on one of the other committees, subgroups. I haven't been in a couple meetings. But I know who was it, Ajit and someone else chair that one. One of the other reps. But no, I think that's a good point. We can kind of look at that. It wouldn't be too much of a lift to look and make sure private providers aren't getting 3 surveys from us in the course of over a month or two. So that makes sense. Mr. Flanders. You're muted, Mr. Flanders.
Mr. Flanders, indeed. Two things. One, I also sit on the subcommittee on the burden for providers. And one of the reasons that kids get outplaced is that their needs exceed the resources of a given school system. So there's clearly an overlap there. We're meeting next week. I'll bring this topic up, but having it come from above would be useful. The second thing is you have to answer questions in order to get through the survey. So I haven't gone through the surveys, but do we ask information about what numbers of students in the private and RESC providers are there because of parental placements, mediation placements, due process placements, as well as IEP placements?
But we try to get at that, and I encourage you guys to take the survey again. Sean just sent out the link a short time ago before this meeting, so I encourage you to take the survey. And I mean, we could go through it. I don't know if it's the best use of our time to go through it all together. But Sean, I know you did a lot of work on it, so I'll kind of, I guess I'll kick it right back to you, because so many of those things are addressed. Yes, John, I don't know if we're going to get all the answers. I don't know if the people answering the survey will have all of the answers to those things either, which is an issue. But we're going to try to get at some of that. Sean, do you want to chime in on that?
Sure, I just want to make sure people know that you can fill in the survey just to move along with any kind of data. I'll scrub the database before
Just say
it.
test and then keep
You can
going.
just put,
Yeah.
you know, on your keyboard. But my other question is also, maybe, I don't know if Brian can answer this. How are we going to capture the unapproved schools? Do we have a list? Do we have, I know you've got all the information for the approved schools, but that would be my concern, is missing opportunities for the unapproved schools, because that they are, specifically stated in the task.
So I guess it depends on the definition of that. Are we talking every private school, religious,
So
otherwise?
yeah, I mean, the way this is written, the way I understand that is private special education schools, right? So not and I went to Xavier High School, so I'll use that as an example, the Xavier High School private school. And again, please, Miriam or Mary or anyone, Senator McCrory, chime in. But let's see, the commission shall review approved and non-approved public and private special education schools. So it's pretty specific on that, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we'll find that it's not a special education school, quote unquote, but there are students that are placed there, either part of a settlement or otherwise. And then in those circumstances, IEPs aren't being implemented because the student's not a public school student. What we could do, Sean, is look at in our PSIS and understand, where students are placed. So I think we may be able to pull the schools, at least that we're aware of, where students are currently placed. Prior to disenrollment, we can run a active list and then reach out to those programs. I'm not sure the survey would apply to them because LEAs can't place as part of a PPT into a non-approved. So we'd have to probably send them a different survey. Just without looking thoroughly at your survey. I would imagine a lot of the questions wouldn't apply.
And aren't there non-approved special education schools? I mean, I'm pretty sure the answer is yes. And I understand what you mean about non-approved schools who accept some special education students who go there in IEPs and the whole thing. But to my knowledge, there are non-approved special education schools that provide services exclusively for, or mostly exclusively for, special education students. That's what I think this is getting at, is those schools. I mean, to me, it's very clear that's what that's getting at.
Yeah, I mean, we've had approved privates before decide not to reapply, and
Right.
stay in business, but PPTs cannot place in a
Understood.
So
Right.
yeah, so if there's any reason about, like, why is the LEA sending, those questions we would just have to look at and say, figure out what the answers are that we're trying to get at for the non-approved.
Okay.
But yeah, and the other thing I was thinking about is the wait lists, like as far as like how we going to maximize our results. And Sean, we can work with your organization on this, but the CSDE can reinforce this as, kind of a legislative requirement that we're looking at understanding current wait lists. And I was at the rest directors meeting last Thursday, and they're able to tell me we have, 47 referrals that we weren't able to. Yeah, I mean, they know that information readily well. So that's why if we can kind of hone in and zero in on what specific data points we want, perhaps the CSDE can take on some of those, again, there's a lot of work that went into the survey, so I'm not suggesting it's revised in any way, but I guess my offer is that CSDE can work directly with CAPSF and in acquiring those wait list numbers. And I think we could do that relatively quickly. It doesn't take long. It's the answer to one question.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think one of our next steps then really is going to be to put together, and we have a draft list of what data information we would be helpful for us for this subgroup to get from CSDE. And we talked about that again a couple months ago. We just kind of got to put that on our list of things to do. But yeah, I think that thank you for the offer, and of course we'll take you up on that. And we just need to know what we want for information. John?
Yeah, not to be a broken record, but there are a fair number of unapproved schools, and if kids are not placed there by IEP, but they are placed there by parents unilaterally and by settlement agreements, and in both cases, it's because the student is unable to get the appropriate services where in her home school, so that these are doing some of the work. And if our goal is to make sure that the resources are available, it's important to know how much of the time we have to step out of the box to get the kid what she needs.
Okay. I, um, I think one thing that's coming to my mind is, as with all these things, there's lots of pieces to all of this. So for me, I try to just stay focused as much as I can on the language of the request that we've been charged with. And even at that, it's hard, right? And even at that, sometimes we're trying to determine, what did they mean by that? Wait, that phrase doesn't really make sense or belong. So I think keeping that in mind, I think we just need to come back to this frequently and not stray and have our scope creep, so to speak. But I think, again, the surveys being one way to gather information, right? Gathering data and information from CSDE being another, talking with RESCs or others, private providers, right? We can talk with others as well, is another way to gather data. Just like Sean raised his hand and said, I'll do the surveys. Of course, we all greatly appreciate that. If there's another piece of this that any subgroup member could jump into and take on a portion of, that would be helpful, right? I think to the group, such as, again, list of data we might need from Brian based on the legislation, based on previous notes from our previous meetings. What might we need from data from Brian? So I'll kind of make that request as this is going along as well. Other comments or thoughts? We were kind of at the survey thing. I mean, to me, I reviewed it. I know a number of people reviewed it, Sean. We talked briefly about it in a previous meeting, and also people give you feedback via email, I believe. So what I would say is we'd like to get that, and it's not going to answer every question under the sun, right? Even for this, but it's going to get at a lot of data. It's fairly lengthy now, but I think manageable. It took me a handful of 5 minutes to complete. It wasn't that long. I mean, I kind of pretended I was in a director position and tried to answer. So it doesn't take too long, because I think it's manageable and gives us good data. But if people have things to add or to do, to comments about it, again, I don't know if it's the best to go through it together now, but certainly get Sean feedback so that we can have that finalized. But then we also need to talk about how we're sending it. And so I'd like to move to that next as soon as Brian talks. I want to start talking about how we're sending it, who it's coming from. Is it CGA? Is it CSDE? Is it Sean's new Bergen Commission Gmail account? You know what I mean? So which is not the best option, obviously, but we need to talk that through. Brian.
Sorry, don't mean to be talking much either, but I have some other ideas here.
Yeah.
I think this is great. Like you said, Tom, as we start to gather data, One thing that I think is important for us to understand and then figure out, okay, we get back this data and now we need to make recommendations about like this wait list data that's in front of us. We were working with, one of our districts and there was a student who they applied to 19 different programs. And one of the programs accepted the student, the other 18 didn't. So because the other 18 didn't doesn't mean the student didn't get the services that they need. So I think it's more common than not to refer a student to multiple programs in the state. Sometimes there's, the right match, and then other times there isn't, depending on transportation and the location of where the child is, all those different factors. But that I just wanted to mention that piece of it, that we want to make sure that the questions that we're asking are getting to the recommendations that we need to make.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that there's so many different pieces. Sometimes I can't even like figure out how to take notes on this stuff. So hopefully me or somebody's taking notes. I know we're getting some this is recorded too, but I know how often I look at a recording of a meeting. It's not very often. So I'm trying to capture the key points as we go along here. Thank you for that, Brian. So thinking about how we send it, what makes the most sense? Do you think, Mary? And I don't know if you've had a chance to have conversations, whether it's CJ or CSDE. And I know Brian's, you sort of, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but what's the best way to, like, once we get this finished, to send it to, and then we have our lists that we can sort of get the list, and we have to who to send it to at those places. Well, let's start with who would send it.
So I just received confirmation this morning. We have a Bergen Commission email through CGA. And as of right now, this is the only question that I have as a follow-up for IT is, can people who are outside of the CGA
Use it, so to speak, like
have
hit
access
send,
to it?
right? Have access to
It,
it and hit send. Yeah.
it may be that just as of right now, it's myself, my aide, and Mia who have access, and I know we could have, obviously the chairs and if we needed to add Jazz, who is the official clerk for education, I'm 99% sure we can add more people to have access to it. So at least it would be coming from an official CGA email. If we choose to not use that, then we can totally go a different direction.
I mean, I think it makes the most sense. The only part that would have to happen there is we'll have to get the distribution list from, let's say, CSDE or CAPSA, or that distribution list of a spreadsheet with emails and contact names, etc., to do the sending to, right? I mean, I imagine that's the way we would get the data. I'm asking Sean or Brian or someone, but even public schools, right? If we're just signing to send it through public school directors of special ed, there's a list that exists. So it's a spreadsheet of some sort somewhere, that then just somebody at CGA, Mary, would have to take that, import it, and kind of go through that process. But to me, that seems like a good idea because, again, it was a legislative commission that this, so I think it makes sense coming from there. Maybe to the point of getting a better response rate, like maybe there's a little more weight to, like, it's the CGA asking these questions, please get back to us, sort of thing. Others thoughts on that? Sounds like a winner. We have thumbs
you don't
up.
have to and you don't have to have the notice coming from just one source. I mean, if you send it out and you have CAPS sending out an email saying you got this survey from the Bergen Commission, we'd appreciate it if you'd fill it out. And Sean, so
that's a great point, John. So yeah, let's say CGA sends it out as the official send out and request, and responses go there, and then a notice from whomever, right? And I always forget all the acronyms. Brian, help me out, but like the special ed directors group, in Connecticut. I can't remember which one.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense that we can use the other groups as a reminder, sort of for advocacy. That makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I like that, John.
Tom, we're happy
Brian.
to include it in our Friday emails that go out to all the directors each Friday. And then we also have a BSE newsletter. We can put it in once it's ready.
That would be great. Thank you, Brian.
That's cool. I love that. That's great. Yeah. So to your point, Joe, we hit them a number of times, and hopefully we can, not just that initial email. That's great. All right. So are we kind of coalescing around that as a method, Mary? I mean, obviously that on your staff's end, but I guess it's a legislative bit and the whole thing, so I guess that makes sense. To have that work for your group. And I mean, you can decide what staff. Everyone's busy, of course, and I know, and it's and
We
in
work as a
timing.
team. We work as a
Yeah,
team.
yeah. So we'll get the actual survey now. The only thing else, Sean, you created as a Google form, kind of attached to this Google account you set up temporarily just to do it, to actually. So Mary, that's maybe an IT question too, or it's not a Tom question that I can answer, but how do we take that and then make sure, because the responses, as I understand, a Google form goes to that Gmail account, right? So we'd have to like take it and kind of reformat it into some other thing. I don't know how that would work. We don't want somebody to have to like retype the whole dang thing, because that would be a pain in the neck. But
John, I can connect with you after, if that works. I'll just so we can figure that out, because I'm also not an IT expert.
yeah, I'm just thinking technically, right? Because I think that's the way it works, Sean, right? All the results get shot to this spreadsheet in Google or somewhere attached to that account. So we don't want that happening. Obviously, we want it to go back to somewhere, the CGA, to collect the data.
That'd
So
be fine.
yeah, we just got to work through that little issue. Okay, and then is that timing? Waiting past graduation, so to speak, waiting past mid-June and the breather of graduation happening before we send it out to these folks, because it's a tough time of year for all. So maybe early July, and I'm sure we'll deal with vacations and stuff over the summer, but I still think we have a better shot. Does that make sense? Most people getting some nods. So all right, so we know who's sending it, we know when we're sending it, who we're sending it to. I would think at schools, at LEAs, it's spread directors, and at the approved privates and non-approved private programs, it's the directors, right? I know they go by different names, but the leadership directors of private programs. So I think that's sort of that list, and I think we have both those lists through between Brian, Sean, right? We have those lists that we can get of those folks. I think, right, in some sort of spreadsheet form.
They're publicly available also on its site, but we can get those, like you said, Tom, and export conveniently.
Oh, right, okay. Again, Mary, that'll be sort of a task that gets assigned to whatever staff is working on that to make those go out, get those out. And then so that's logistics, I think, on it. Do we include RESCs as a comment that got made? And I think the answer is probably yes, because they're similar. They're not the same. I mean, I don't know if they're necessarily captured. I know this is always tricky, Brian, right? When we have all these like sort of slightly different named groups and programs, but I think we're trying to capture what the needs are in the state and what the capacity is, et cetera. You kind of have to include those, whether they're not specifically in here listed, but it's certainly covered under in the state, right? Special education programs and services in the state. So I think we definitely want to make sure we include the RESCs as well. So it's private providers and RESCs.
Tom Seek would be happy to compile a list of non-approved and get this survey or a modified version to them so that you get that input too.
Okay. That would be helpful. A list of non-approveds. with context, ideally, would be great, right? Thank you, John. Anything else on this that I'm missing? And then I think get the feedback, if we could, to Sean, if everyone could take, a few minutes and blast through it. I did it before this meeting and just did a test one and blasted through it. And I had looked at it before and given Sean feedback, so I didn't really have much to add. The only comment I had is at the end of the survey, the last question was around the kind of the second part of this, I'll call it, right, is the application and application criteria piece, right? There was a question at the end, Sean, about, I can't remember the exact wording, but how's that going, sort of thing. It was more sort of a general open-ended question about the application process and reapplication process. But I think so that's the only part that I think we might want to look at and say, hey, do we want to ask an additional question or two or whatever of the private providers on that to get at that? Or maybe there's a different way to capture that information as well. Obviously, Brian can give us information about the changes to that process, but if there's anything we want to capture in the survey, maybe just take a peek at that last bit. Does that make sense? I don't remember. Do you have that question there at the end?
Yeah, it just says, please describe any barriers and proposed solutions regarding the current initial approval or renewal processes.
Right. Okay. And it was, yeah, so which is great because it would be interesting and good to get that information from the programs. It was sort of an add-on. It's right to the end, it got to the end and we should include that. So, but anyway, if everyone could do that, that's great, and give feedback to Sean. I'll say in the next week or so would be great if we could do that quickly. It doesn't take long to complete. That would be helpful. Okay, I think we made some progress there on the surveys. Other questions or comments before we move on to the next thing? Sean, yeah, Sean first and then Brian. Sorry, Brian.
Yeah.
He raised his hand so quick.
Just really quickly, if you're thinking it's going to take a long time, it really shouldn't. We spent a lot of time going through word by word, doing a lot of even grammatical changes. I took every single note. So what you have is the most recent version. So it really should be a really quick process for you. So
yeah, it's pretty tight. It's pretty tight already. I appreciate that, Sean. Brian, go ahead.
I was just going to say that if you want to make a note, September 14th is our back to school special education conference, where we have typically 600 plus folks from districts and the APSEPs as well. So there may be opportunity to gather information real time, depending on what the survey, response is. We can either reinforce or, have a captive audience there, even to follow up in some ways. And then so just offering that. And then the second piece is that in looking at the survey, if I'm a refs director and I run 6 different programs, the expectation is that you're answering this question for each of the 6. And Sean, I know some of your colleagues too, you have multiple programs where the capacity is different at every site. So that's just more of a note in how we disseminate the information to gather the best information possible.
Right. You're answering it to the capacity is 50.
It's almost
is that one school or all schools combined sort of thing, right?
Exactly. Right. Versus EastCon offering 6 different programs, they wouldn't be able to answer that. The wait list would be different for every program.
Right.
Capacity.
Right. So those, in that case, I would think we'd want to get it to the school, right?
School
to the program,
level.
right? We want to get it to River Street, not to CREC.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not CREC answering it for all of them. We want to get it to each of the individual schools, and they're very different too. So we would definitely want to at that. But even on the approved private side, there's some that have multiple locations, right? There's a bunch of schools that have multiple locations. That's a good thought. I appreciate the offer on back to school event, because it is a way, maybe as we collect data over the summer on the surveys, and to follow up and get some even focus group type of thing. We could have
or if there's any messaging from the subcommittee or anything like that, we can fold that into the time we have with folks together.
And Tom, if that's something where somebody has to sit in a place in a venue, if we know ahead of time, I would be happy to show up somewhere and support in that.
Awesome.
I would just need to know in regards to my scheduling for my school here.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think I've gone to the event a number of times over the years, and I think it might be a good idea just for all of us, if you think you're able, and it's far enough away. So thank you for the heads up, Brian, to maybe put it on your schedule as a tentative hold, that day. And I think it's sort of like a 9 to 2 event, something like that, Brian. I
Exactly.
believe. Yeah, it's
Connecticut
like
Convention Center in Hartford.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So like 9 to 2 in Hartford. Yeah, no, that's great. I could see as depending on how this plays out over the summer and the information we gather. So the other thing that I just want to address, or message, right? Or message. Is the data request thing. So that's the one thing that I know, Brian, I sent you at one point kind of a list from our notes, and I resent it to you this morning just so it's top of your inbox because I know you get a lot of emails. It was a list from back in like January or February or something like that. So maybe take a peek at that. That was a start. That wasn't certainly exhaustive, but it was a start of some data. And actually, I copied it at the bottom of my notes here, so I remembered. But these were our notes, actually, the January meeting. So these were just different things that we had talked about as a group back then. And I kind of highlighted the ones that we think the CSTE could provide us information on. So I think there's two things maybe, Brian, that we might ask of CSD is one, some of this information, and we can figure out what additional information we need from the State Department of Ed. And then also maybe if we can plan on you presenting to our June meeting on, again, if you're available. I know June's not a fun month. It's tricky, but we made it through our not so or quite busy session months. But June 10th at 9 is our next meeting we have on the schedule. And of course, are these running into your State Board of Ed meetings like every time? Am I running into them like every month? That would be terrible if I keep running into those. Hopefully not. But if you could present on some of this other stuff again around the criteria and those changes to criteria and stuff like that.
Our board meeting is the 3rd in June.
Perfect.
Before, but we do have a hold for a leadership retreat on June 10. But I just have to find out more details about that, the timing, and I do have the meeting on my calendar from 9 to 10:30 for this group.
Perfect.
So I'll just be in
Awesome.
communication on that. There's a conflict.
Yeah, so if you're able on those things that are more like providing, I mean, if there's information you can provide for all of this stuff via email and just information that way, great, right? If you feel like, and it seems like there might be a spot where it might require a discussion and a kind of a presentation of some information and discussion. I know you do this with a bunch of the other subgroups, and it's a lot on your plate, but that would be helpful, certainly around the application process. So everyone's on the same page on that would be helpful. And thank you for that. Any other thoughts or questions or comments? Mary, what am I missing?
Scene.
I mean, the survey was our biggest thing, so we have that kind of, I think, a plan of attack there. So I'd say the combination of Brian and Sean can get us the lists of people to send it to. Sean's will hopefully wrap up with comments from all the actual survey, or 2 of them. John will look at the non-approved things and maybe doing some modifications to the survey as needed to capture that. Any other thoughts on that? But I think we're okay. I mean, we have some time on it because we're not going to send out till July anyways, but at least we can get things spooled up and ready to go and get the list ready and do the work, because there might be work associated again with taking this Google form one and making it into something that CGA can collect the data on and all that stuff. So we'll have a little time to make all that happen. Um, so if that works, and then I
Is
guess,
there,
go
the
ahead.
only thought I have is we have not discussed an initial due date for the survey. If we send it out in July,
Good
do we want it
question.
back by, we say September 15th, September 1st? Is that what are,
I would do it like, to me, I would do it like super quick, because like to me, if you get the email and you like, I'd do it in 2 to 4 weeks is what I would do. I know vacations are tricky in the summer, but like if we sent it out early July, I'd say early August, just to with reminders, I guess, coming out from a couple different places. Hey, get this done. That's my thought. If you make it too long, I mean, literally, if it takes like 10 minutes to fill out,
no, I know, but there's
you
even
just
the
delay it.
timing, just thinking
Yeah.
about how many tasks I have that only take 5 minutes, but
Right. Right.
if you have 100 of them, it can
Yeah.
get,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
what are any other members' thoughts?
Yeah.
If we say August 15th or August 1st, and then knowing that we're gonna probably send out a reminder after that and be like, hey, deadline extended. Sean?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Have a shorter time frame, but then extend it as needed.
Okay.
All right. I like that.
Liz?
Au- I think that August 1 date is probably a good one. I think the closer you get to that beginning of the start, people are very well intentioned. It just may be something, I think that end of July, beginning of August will give people time to fill it out, in particular if it's in the school system.
Okay, that sounds good. So we'll say August 1st, and then with the internal understanding that probably August 15th will be the deadline to get most of it, and then we can start collating things for a September meeting, if that makes sense. Brian?
Yeah. I think it does.
Just
Yeah, Brian?
just a note that that's a Saturday.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Then,
Calendars, details.
yeah. No, I like that too, because again, the first couple of weeks of August, traditionally a lot of folks take that vacation, and programs have summer programs and ESY and all that kind of stuff, and like
Yeah,
you're like you could finally breathe and take vacation. That's when I always go on vacation. It's the
yeah.
first 2 weeks of August, you know. So
Yeah,
getting it done before then.
July 6th is a Monday after the holiday, and then you have the third a Monday for August, that first week of August.
Yeah,
I agree. I think for school districts, those like especially last 2 weeks in August are really jam-packed.
right. All right. So send July 6th and respond by August 1st or 3rd, and then reminders afterwards. So clean up and follow up. I like that. Thank you, Mary. It's these details that it's nice to work out right now. Make
Mhm.
sure with all the people in the room that it kind of makes sense too. Um, and I guess I'll look into this, the other subgroups quickly. I mean, I'll basically look through um, the tasks that each subgroup has, right? Because we have those lists somewhere. That probably Mia sent out to us a long time ago, or Jazz, but just to see if there's other areas that other groups are, and I can message the other chairs too and ask them, um, other subgroup chairs, to make sure.
Okay.
I'm just looking at my quick notes here. My notes were not exhaustive, but there was something. Um, and then yeah, once we have that going, Brian, that's great. You, Sean, et cetera, can do the reminders to say, hey, folks, fill us out. That would be great.
So
I
I would
guess the
say,
only go ahead.
sorry, just to be clear, I would be able to reach out to CAPSF members, but I
Right,
think the communication to non-members would ultimately come from the state.
Yeah.
right, right. And in the same way, like, yeah, anyone that has like is it con case, Brian? Did I say it? Is that the right one?
You did, yeah.
Yeah, special
Yeah,
education.
like Sean's mentioning, there aren't members of the organization, so we have the complete
Right,
list at site.
right. So yeah, so Sean would be the reminder to say,
Yeah.
hey folks, send it out. And then Brian, you can hit the rest of them. That's great.
Yep. Yep.
And the SPED directors as well as we go to the school districts. So the only thing that I feel like is a sort of an unresolved one is we kind of need to look at what the list of data that we need from CSDE is based on our ask, based on what the survey is already getting for data, and it might be additional that helps with that. But is anybody able to take a crack at kind of like crafting a list of data requests that we might want from CSDE? I'm trying to balance my offering to do something that I know I won't have time to, and
Tom, are you
spreading the wealth.
Tom, are you referring to the other reports and
No,
information that we're trying to get? Or are you talking about?
I think what I'm talking about is there data, Brian? I know you're sort of raising your hand to kind of maybe help me think this through. I was thinking about what data does State Department of Ed have, and maybe Brian, you're the best one to create this list that helps us answer this question, right? That and helps us provide our recommendations that the State Department of Ed has that he can get to us. And again, we kind of talked about some of it, and we had this note here: CSD data available. This is from back in January, right? Like, there's some data available that'll help us with this. You know, I that's where I'm getting, and I'm not too tight on it, but that's Brian.
Yeah, what I was going to suggest is maybe we could craft what we have and share that with the subcommittee, and then see, how that supports the task. Because in my mind, there's sort of two different things in the language there. One is around the wait list for services, which is a huge topic. I mean, we kind of get into staff vacancies, recruitment, retention, a lot of different things in that context, when you think about programming. The other piece of it is the application process to become an approved private special education program. So we could, I think you had asked for a June presentation, we could share with the committee ahead of time, and then talk through our application process, as well as the licensing report. That would be a good point of reference. Number of programs, locations of programs, number of students, like all those things we have. I'm not sure if that's we didn't talk a lot about that today, and I'm not sure necessarily it's connected to the survey. But that was just a suggestion that we could present on that. If there are going to be recommendations made about the application process,
Right.
we want to make sure folks understand the application process as it currently is constituted.
I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense. Mary, thank you for asking the question, because I'm like brainstorming as we're talking here, just like, okay, what else do we need? Like, sort of thing, right? Like, what can we get from them? Because a month's going to go by and then it's going to be June, and I know how these things work. And next thing you know, it's October, and we're like, we're still looking for information.
Perhaps what we should do is, if we all take the updated survey, and if we can make a list of any subject matters that jump out at each of us, if there's anything after that we think, oh, this information would be helpful to have, and the question I thought was going to get to it maybe needs to be expanded. If we could do that ahead of the June meeting, that would, I think, be helpful, rather than, I'm just thinking, if asking Brian to put together a giant pile of data and then looking at our very comprehensive survey and trying to sort of cross match in real time, I just don't know how productive that would be.
Okay. I like that. I like that. And also, Mary, would you mind, since we don't have everyone here, can you draft an email saying that we can send to all members, so, and then everyone's sort of clear, like, hey, here's the links to the survey, please take it. The stuff you just said, I was trying to jot it down, but and then give them the deadline of whatever, a week before our June meeting or something like that. I don't know. And then no, that would be great. That's a great a great idea. And certainly, Brian, on the stuff that on the application process, that's sort of an easy, not easy, but that's the easily packaged sort of piece of that you can provide us presentations, less information on.
Yeah, so if there is interest from the subcommittee in us doing that presentation about the application process, just let us know. If that's not part of the agenda, that's completely fine as well.
I mean, I have an interest in it because I think it's important for us to have that baseline. Do others want to opine or comment? I mean, I know something about the process just because I've worked in the area, but I don't know if others do. Certainly, I imagine Sean knows about the process, but others may not know about it. So I think it'd be helpful for all of us to have that baseline understanding.
And we could be respectful of time, if there's other
Yeah.
items on the agenda, we have kind of a summary document to go through the process. We won't get into the weeds as much as unless there are questions about it. So we could try to give it an overview.
Yep.
Try to keep that between, 15 minutes or so, or 20 at the most.
That'd be great. Thank you. And then the only other thing that I had is planning for future meetings. So before we get to that, is any other comments, thoughts, questions, queries? Mary, others?
I'm good.
Okay. So we were trying to plan these out. I don't even know. I think, were we on the second? Was that, we were kind of like the second Wednesday of the month? I don't know. We just kind of stuck with it because it was working ish. But so we had June 10th at 9. July is always tricky, but we can try to meet and see who we can get there. August to me gets even trickier, and that's why I wrote end of August, because I know that first couple of weeks of August is, I know I take vacations and a lot of folks do, but of course the end of August is tricky because start of school starting. So thoughts on future meetings. We talked about once a month is what we've been doing, but we haven't actually been able to even do that. So I'm a little leery to try to plan more than once a month. But thoughts on that?
I think it would make sense if we can get together, obviously in June, to review the survey before we are able to send it out for one final time. And then, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I know that my availability is both flexible and also tricky because of family time and conferences and things like that. So, perhaps we meet in June and we send out the survey at the beginning of July. And do we meet in the beginning of September then, or is that too long?
The only other thing I'll say, and Mary, and we haven't had a chance to talk about this, is we have all our other tasks too,
Right.
which we haven't addressed. You know what I mean? So
Right.
we have like the Medicaid insurance billing, respite care study, like interdistrict management. So we have these other 3 tasks, which I'm supposed to address. how well we get to them, and so we could also kind of start kicking those off too as we're waiting for. And I'm not a proponent of meeting just to meet, you know what I mean, at all, because everyone's busy. But I want to also not lose sight of the fact that we have 3 other tasks, which are smaller. This is the bigger one to address, and so that's just my other thought.
Does it work for the group if we just keep the second Wednesday of the month on the calendar for now, and we can reevaluate as the summer continues?
Not everybody is on each subcommittee. So maybe that's why we don't have as much participation today, because there may be people that just didn't volunteer for this piece. So I think making sure based on the agenda that we have the right people in the room is more important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For example, if I'm not available on the day you do respite care, that's not a big.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. This is who's on this particular subgroup. There's our list of who's on the subgroup, been assigned to the subgroup. And I highlighted those who showed up, were able to make it today. but that's a good point. And maybe, and Mary, you and I can have this conversation too offline to kind of
Yeah.
just briefly, to your point, Sean, like, okay, what's going to be our kind of tentative topics for these July, August, September, right? And then people like say, oh, I'm not going to be, have too much input to that, so I can skip that one, sort of thing. But I think it's good to kind of hold them on your calendar anyway, so that they're on everyone's calendar. So I like that idea, personally. But and we sticking to the 9 to 10:30 seems to be a good time of day. We originally did it because then session hadn't started, but but now we're out of session, so we can adjust the time, Mary, if you want. But that's what we've been sticking with, at 9 to 10:30.
I am here at your convenience, so not a worry. Whatever works for
All right.
best for everyone.
All right, cool. All right, well, let's. Any other thoughts or comments, queries, questions? Looks like we lost our esteemed co-chairs at some point in time. I didn't even notice. All right. Well, people have our asks, our tasks, I should say. And we will see you all in June. Have a good end of the school year for those of you that are involved on the school side. And yeah, we'll see you in June. And I'll circle back with you, Mary.
All right, sounds
Thanks,
good.
everyone.